Good morning, history junkies, and welcome to the Literature Lovers podcast series, where we analyze different texts and novels throughout history. Today, we will be discussing a common theme found in both Orinoco by Aphra Behn and in the selected works by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. More specifically, we will be discussing feminism.
In Orinoco by Alfred Ben, a wealthy prince from Cormorants, West Africa, is tricked into slavery, transported to the New World, and eventually enslaved by a man in Suriname, South America. When he arrives, he eventually recognizes and reunites with his lost love from his home country. Later in the novel, both Orinoco and his love, Imawenda, stage a rebellion against those who enslaved them. Orinoco and Imawenda lead others to become fugitives of slavery in a fight for their freedom. Imawenda fights with the bow and arrow and displays many characteristics of an epic hero. Eventually, Orinoco and Imawenda are caught by those who enslaved them. Orinoco kills Imawenda in an attempt to save her and because of cultural norms. When he is discovered next to Imawenda's body, Orinoco is punished for his leadership in the rebellion and tortured to death. Although Imawenda dies, Alfred Ben allows Imawenda's name to live on by mentioning her name as the last word in the novel.
In the selected works of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, the author, Sor Juana, discusses her own experiences through the use of poetry. She does this with the purpose of showing her unique experiences, not to sway other perspectives. However, this does not detach her writing from the readers.
Both novels brush upon feminism, but what is feminism exactly? And how might Alfred Ben and Sor Juana define this term and see it in their respective nations? In this podcast, we will analyze and synthesize the common theme of feminism, as well as hear from Alfred Ben and Sor Juana themselves. Let's dive in.
So, what is feminism? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, feminism is the belief in and advocacy of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, expressed especially through organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Both Aphra Behn and Sor Juana illustrate this common theme throughout their works.
In Orinoco, Aphra Behn displays feminism when Imawenda is displayed as an equal to her husband Orinoco, when she is described as an epic hero, and when her strength is emphasized. Imawenda also refuses to submit to the king's attempts to rape her earlier in the novel. In the end, she fights for her freedom with a bow and arrow, leading to a man's demise. Imawenda is seen as a strong woman who is not afraid to fight for her rights and freedom. While Aphra Behn shows how Imawenda experiences equality, the author also shows that equality is not felt in her own society. Aphra Behn writes, but his misfortune was to fall in an obscure world that afforded only a female pen to celebrate his fame. Although feminism is nearly non-existent in her time, Aphra Behn gives Imawenda equality to her male counterparts throughout the novel.
In the selected works, Sor Juana continuously displays feminism in her writings as she writes of how women are never treated as equals to men, and instead are blamed for the world's and their counterparts' struggles. In one poem, Sor Juana even calls men hypocrites because of their lack of effort to support equality. In another, poem 92, Sor Juana calls out men for holding women to ridiculous standards. One line describes men as complaining if women are cruel and mocking them if they love. She shows how women are unjustly criticized by men no matter what they do.
Now for our interview with Aphra Behn. Good morning, and thank you for being with us, Aphra Behn.
Thank you for having me in the Literature Lovers podcast series. It's an honor.
Thank you. You are the first woman in England to identify as a professional writer. Congratulations on that. Can you tell me how you were able to achieve that? Was it difficult?
Of course. So, women in 17th century England are treated as second-class citizens. At birth, we are subject to our fathers. Later, we are handed over like chattel to our husbands. Most women become housewives, but others are lucky enough to find work as washerwomen, in food preparation, and as dyers. So, education for girls in my nation is little to none. Those who have access to it are almost always of a high class, as private dame school is only available to girls of high class. It is difficult to become a professional because of cultural norms and this lack of education.
This sounds awful. Was the reason of women considered second-class citizens the reason you became a writer?
Well, don't tell anyone, but I was a spy before I became a professional writer. After successfully completing my mission, the Crown did not want to pay me back for my trip to England to Belgium. Therefore, I had to borrow money and I went to debtor's prison. After getting released, I decided to become a professional writer so that I didn't have to depend on anyone for money.
We'll tell our viewers not to tell anyone about your secret. Were there any experiences in your life that you implemented in your books to show feminism?
Well, in my works, I show how women can be independent, just like how I was with my money. I show this in my book, Orinoco, when Emawenda goes to war while she is pregnant. This is unusual for women in my society, and this shows even more of her strength. Emawenda doesn't depend on anyone and is a great fighter, just like I was when I learned more of the importance of independence.
For Ben, thank you for your time. It has been a pleasure hearing from such a great writer.
That was an interview with Ben. In just a short break, we will hear from Sorwana too.
Do you enjoy learning about history? Do you want exclusive insider information on how historical stories are written and influenced? The Novel History Stories 101 is the perfect fit for you. For the low price of $29.99, you may have hard copy text access to over 10 different authors' unique stories, including Charles Dickens, John Milton, and Dante Alighieri. Buy your own today from select retailers like Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com.
Interview with Sor Juana. Good morning, and thank you for very much for joining us, Sor Juana.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here.
So let's dive right into the interview. First of all, could you tell me a little bit about women in your time period and how they were treated?
Of course. I lived in 17th century Mexico, which had been colonized by Spain for centuries. In my time, women were not seen as being equal to men. In all of New Spain's institutions, anywhere from the church to the court, us women were given inferior roles. The men did not believe that we were capable of great knowledge and intellect, so they did not trust us with powerful positions. In my time, for all of her life, a woman was essentially treated as the property of a man. When she was a girl, she belonged to her father. When she was married, she belonged to her husband. And we cannot have a discussion about the rights of women without acknowledging race. In New Spain, the native women had even fewer rights than Spaniard women. So while all women suffered injustice during this time, the native women were mistreated even more because of their race.
How did this injustice affect you, and what did you do to try and combat them?
I knew that I essentially had two choices, either get married or join the convent. In order to pursue even greater knowledge, which was a passion of mine, I became a nun. If I had married, I would not have had the time to study and write, since women were expected to have children and take care of them. I believe that my decision to be independent and pursue my writing was an act of rebellion against injustice. As I mentioned before, men believed that the minds of women were inferior. Education was not offered to women for this reason. My writing proves that this is not at all true, that women are capable of pursuing great knowledge and possessing incredible skills.
Speaking of your writing, could you elaborate on how you incorporated feminism in your work?
Many of my writings have feminist themes to them. One poem that I wrote was a reply to a gentleman who had told me that I should become a man. It goes, "Sir, in reply to your note, no help at all is at hand. No muse dictates a word. None is disposed to be bland. No, not one of those 9, mothers of wit, jest, and joke, dares respond to your verse with even the feeblest croak." I pushed back against this claim that only men could be poets. I wanted to prove that women were just as capable as men when it came to literature, and I believe that my clever reply did just that.
Sor Juana, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to hear from such an influential woman as yourself.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, that was so insightful hearing from the authors themselves.
Right? I couldn't believe Alfred Ben and Sir Juana have such different rights and customs in their respective nations. It was also interesting to see how their view on feminism and their society's application of feminism impacts their works.
Anyways, we had a great time discussing and learning more about this theme of feminism, and hope you had a great time too. In recap, today we analyzed and synthesized the common theme of feminism found in both Orinoco by Alfred Ben and in the selected works of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. We also interviewed the authors themselves and learned more about the cultures of both Mexico and Suriname.
Thank you for listening in today on the Literature Lovers podcast series. We hope to have you back next week.